I wanted to give an example of what good character and world building can achieve in a story, and the example I'll be using will be Rin from the Naruto series, and how she is used as a catalyst for Obito Uchiha to fall from grace. And so when you look through Obito's character and what he has done throughout his whole run, from betraying the Hidden Leaf Village, controlling the Nine Tails and attacking Minato, the fourth Hokage, going on to manipulate Pain, taking control of Yagura, and essentially destroying the Hidden Mist Village, and then of course eventually starting the Fourth Great Ninja War. And so seeing those events and rooting it all the way back to Rin is what I'll be doing here. And so first we'll look at Rin herself. And what we see with the character is that she is not simply a fantasy of Obito. And that is not to say that if she was, that would be a bad thing, but it's to say that in this case, it is not simply that from Obito's POV that she is somebody that is good, but it is also when we don't see her through Obito's eyes that we see how good she is. And so what we see of a character is that she really is kind. She really is self-sacrificial, as we see in the manga that she is willing to sacrifice herself for the sake of the village. She did not panic and try to get into the village to get the Three Tails out of her, but she chose to sacrifice herself to avoid such a danger. She readily accepts that she should die and runs in front of Kakashi's lightning blade attack. And so with these few actions that we see from her, how she treats Obito, how she keeps the group together, making sure that Kakashi and Obito work together, and her eventual self-sacrificial nature. And so with seeing all that, we understand what is she representing, and she is a good person in this shinobi world. And so now we have to see how does she become, rather, a good catalyst. And to do so, we have to finally talk about Obito and his love for Rin. And so what happens with Obito becomes a true testament to what is possible with world building. Because yes, of course, we know that even in reality, that people have started wars for their loved ones, or because of one of their loved ones have passed on. But that relation to reality is not what is important when looking at Obito's character. But what is impressive is that Obito's character makes sense outside of reality and simply because of the world building. And so it's not that the reader has to rely on something that they know of our own reality, but it is something that they can ascertain from the story itself alone. And so Obito's deep-seated hatred for the world is so terrifying, especially as he claims that it is only indifference, that his motivation seems absurd. But then we realize that he's not the only one. He's not the only one willing to go this far, especially in his own clan. And so to understand Obito, we have to go back to Sasuke Uchiha. And so with Sasuke, he is introduced to us having this brooding nature and having an insatiable drive to kill his older brother. But then what we observe is because of Team 7, this goal wanes in his memory. He becomes more like a normal person in the context of the Naruto series. And so this shows that the Uchiha are like normal people in that way. But then Sasuke meets Itachi again. And what I mean by meet again is in Shippuden, and they've already had their final battle, so to speak. And so I think it would be more accurate to say that it is when he has met Obito, and Obito tells him about the life of Itachi, that you see that Sasuke gains this deep-seated hatred as well for the Hidden Leaf Village, for the elders. And that's when his actions become very grand, where we see that he is willing to join the Akatsuki, capture Killer Bee, his tentacle, causing the 5 Kage summit and attacking that summit and becoming an international criminal because of it. And so his relatively simple revenge has now exploded into this path where he could not live a normal life unless he did massive contributions to society to go back to a relatively normal life. And so what I want to recognize about Sasuke's anger is that it wasn't as focused on his entire clan, but it was far more focused on his older brother. When we hear about Sasuke talking about his anger and about the vengeance he wants to bring to the Hidden Leaf Village, it is mostly centered on Itachi, and then by extension his clan. And this point is reinforced and proven by the fact that when Naruto meets Sasuke, or rather meets the reanimated Itachi, that's how he summarizes the situation to Itachi himself. That it's not about the death of the clan, but how the Hidden Leaf Village and the elders had made Itachi himself suffer so much. So we do see Sasuke go on to attack the Kage summit, and it's important to remember that his goal was to kill Danzo himself, but then what we see is that he is willing to kill the people in his way to do so. This is a stark difference from what he was doing under Orochimaru, where he did not kill, but at the Kage summit he's willing to kill the samurai, he's willing to kill the Kage's escorts, and even the Kage themselves. He's willing to abandon his newly made team for the sake of his vengeance. The same team that not so long ago he was willing to protect against Killer Bee, an enemy that far outclassed him, more so in the anime than the manga. And then of course later on he's willing to kill Karin just so that he can get the opportunity to kill Danzo. And so that was a far more direct depiction of how far he was willing to go. And so it's through his actions and his lack of empathy towards anyone in his way that we can link him towards Obito, with the thing that these two share being the Sharingan and their Uchiha blood. The second Hokage then gives us an explanation as to why the Uchiha are the way that they are. And we learn that the Uchiha love too much, or you could say they love too deeply. And so depending on the circumstances, that love can turn into a very deep-seated hatred towards the cause of the loss of that love. And we know that this is not only the case for the Uchiha, but it's a chakra problem in general. We know this through the chakra and Kaguya and how Madara explained the issue. That basically that chakra, or rather because of the history of what Kaguya's history is, that hatred goes through chakra as well, and so it's very difficult to get rid of grudges, specifically in the Naruto universe. Although chakra's cycle of hatred has a lot of branching off consequences, and an example of this through Obito's character is that Obito's anger at what the Hidden Mist had done to Rin essentially made him go and attack it, and so he basically continued the cycle of hatred, the small cycle from that little incident that he went through. And then what happened is that he affected other characters, and so those characters grew up, and I'm talking about Zabuza and Haku. They grew up in the situation from the hatred that was in the Hidden Mist, and it circles all the way back to Naruto's first mission. And so in that way we see that in a long drawn out way these cycles and cause and effects happen in the Naruto universe through this hatred. And so when we take Sasuke's entire life and what Obito is currently doing, put it together with the second Hokage, Tobirama's explanation of the Uchiha, the puzzles come falling into place. And so what we learn from all that is that Obito has a massive genetic drive to being who he is. Going back to Obito's actions, we see that his torture of the Hidden Mist village is actually a very key point in his actions, because it is his biggest contradiction concerning his ideology. Because rightfully so, in his eyes, he blames the Hidden Mist village for what happened to Rin, and in fact for the entire situation that he understood, as we find out from Obito himself that he knows that Rin sacrificed herself. And what we know from the flashback is that it was not obvious what happened there, and so it means that he made the effort to find out what happened, almost as if he wanted to know who to blame in this scenario, or rather for that scenario. And so knowing that, we understand that of course he went to the Hidden Mist village to destroy it, or rather to torture it. But this conflicts with his newfound worldview from Madara, because Obito would have you believe that he does not care for this world, because it's false, it's fake, and yet his actions of vengeance say otherwise. And his actions really do speak towards his hatred, because if he truly believed in Madara's ideology, then it would not have mattered if Madara had told him that he himself was the cause of Rin's death and caused that entire situation. The news of that would not shake Obito, should not have shaken Obito at all, because of course the world is fake. It would not have mattered if he was being manipulated, but staying true to Madara's ideology, it would be more about the fact that it was possible. That would be the reason why the world was hell. And so now, so far we have shown that Obito is genetically dispositioned to be in the role that he is playing. Unlike Sasuke, Obito did not have friends around him that were going to allow him to wane off from his path, but rather he had Madara and the Zetsus who kept on egging him on to his new path. And now we've gotten to the point of Obito's acceptance of Madara's ideology, or rather superficial acceptance of it, and that acts as the first layer of his mask. And because it's a mask, we start seeing small contradictions in Obito's actions. We start seeing that the plan of the Infinite Tsukiyomi is very strange in its execution, where we don't really have a very justifiable reason as to why he would not simply go to the Hidden Mist village and simply collect the Three Tails and be on his way. Another instance is when he takes off his hood when fighting Minato, the fourth Hokage, trying to see if Minato would recognize him, and not simply teleporting away with Naruto into his dimension and back to his hideout, or rather with Kushina, because she still contained the Nine Tails at that point. And so what we see is that he puts all these steps into his plan that are completely unnecessary if he truly believed in what he was doing was the right thing to do. But what we see in the war is that especially through Naruto, that Obito wants to be disproven. He does not want to be correct about the world. But of course, even before we get to Naruto, what we see is that his mask is getting thicker, so to speak, because of all the events that he causes. But then, of course, the world becomes worse because of his interferences. And with the world becoming worse, just reinforcing what Madara had taught him, that the world is hell, and the real problem is that these things are even allowed to happen in the first place. Even with his unnecessary adoption of Sasuke, adoption into the Akatsuki, it was just simply reinforcing his own beliefs, that just like him, Sasuke can be taken down a dark path. And so of course he tries to do the same with Naruto, by forcefully trying to contradict Naruto's words and actions. And so Obito builds this mask, this ideology that he metaphorically shares with all of Naruto's villains. But we all know, of course, as the readers, that underneath that mask is the real Obito. And so when that mask is shattered, we see that Obito is still there. He has not fully become Madara. And so on a side note, what I also enjoy was how Kishimoto wrote the physical and metaphorical representation of the mask, and how Obito essentially points at it and says that it's hard to break because it's super great tough. And of course makes it all the more powerful that Naruto is able to metaphorically and physically shatter that mask. And with that mask being shattered, we see that Obito's entire field to his character has changed, as now we start to see more of his own personality. When we see Kakashi apologizing and asking Obito why he's doing that, we see that he's actually listening to him. Although he's still angry at Kakashi, we are able to see that he does blame Kakashi, but continues to try and put back the mask on and say that he is above all that. And we see this through how he attacks Kakashi. He just simply seems that he's punishing him rather than ending the fight as efficiently as he could have. And of course, Kakashi not wanting to kill his friend also is not acting as efficiently as he could have. And this whole fight really showed the personality and the character of all these characters. It was just that well written. And the best part is that everything that you're seeing of Obito now is the accumulation of everything that he has gone through, as well as his genetics. It's because of the world building, it's because of who his character is, that everything is happening the way that it is. And his future actions of saying that none of this matters to him, that he has a hole in his heart, starts to feel like a speech onto himself rather than directed at Kakashi, because his actions contradict what he says because of his anger towards Kakashi. And so all of this points back to what Naruto says when he had broken Obito's mask, when he says that I can see the pain in your face. So what we see is how Obito's character was built with the world building, and the fact that we would not only use Green as a catalyst, but we also use Sasuke as a sort of a mirror to Obito, where we see that they have both lost someone precious and they face a similar loss. And so we don't have to see Obito's entire full life to understand exactly how did he get to the point that he did, because through the world building, through everything that we've seen of the series so far, and the connections that Kishimoto has made, we see what is truly possible with character and world building. With that, we're able to see Obito's source, the source of his character. And this information clearly separates him from his ideology that he has adopted from Madara. This is also just another example of how Kishimoto incorporates the central inspiration for his story, which is the conversations that he had with the surrounding older generations who had experienced war, and ultimately summarized war as being a result of grudges. Unresolved grudges that we see reflected in Obito's character himself, with his hatred of the world because of Rin's death. And so of course this video was not about Obito's character in its entirety, but it was simply discussing how we get his character and his role as a villain, how it was built, and really in praise of what is possible with writing, as Obito's character himself and how he became who he became is not simply told linearly, or rather it might not have been possible to be told linearly, but writing shows us that we can break those barriers. Yeah, and so with that, that's the end of the video.